What up, fam? It's Mr. Fisher coming at you from his home studio again. Just want to point out I'm rocking the sweet headband that my daughter loaned me without her knowledge. I think I kind of look like Queen Elsa, maybe something. Well, I look like something. Anyway, so hopefully you enjoyed chapter one of Siddhartha earlier this week on Monday, and hopefully you'll have your quote done by now. It wasn't too hard of an assignment. Same thing for today. We're going to be reading chapter 2, which is with the Samanas, which starts on page 13 if you have this copy of the text. And I should warn you that the PDF that I posted on Google Classroom, I believe I posted it, I'm pretty sure, it's going to be a little bit different than the book. There are different versions of this. It'll have different words and probably different page numbers and that sort of thing. That's fine. If you find a quote in it and it's from the chapter and you can connect with it and you can explain how it connects to the world, I don't care if it's in my book or not. It's still from Hermann Hesse, and that's all that really matters. So when last we left Siddhartha, he was leaving home. He and Govinda were striking out on their own, and they were going to join the Samanas, who were wandering ascetics. They are people who get rid of all of their clothing, except for their loincloths, and they don't have any material possessions. They basically take a vow of poverty, much like a Catholic priest or something like that. And they live off the land. And they have some really interesting, and I say interesting because it's not insulting, they have very extreme practices for meditation and that sort of thing. And so we're going to see Siddhartha go through some really interesting changes in this. Now, if you've ever looked up a picture of Buddha, there are two versions of Buddha. Number one here, this is Siddhartha Gautama. Whether that's the same guy that we're reading about or it's a different Siddhartha Gautama, that's up for debate. But this is the Indian version of Buddha. He is thin and he is very serious and somber. Where if you look at the other version that's kind of chubby and cherubic, that's the Chinese Buddha. He is, he's got the bald head and the big rotund belly and the big smile. Also a Buddha, but slightly different variation of Buddha. So we're looking at this version of Buddha right here, Siddhartha Gautama, and this is where he becomes skinny and ascetic and austere. So, chapter 2, without further ado. Okay, with the Samanas. On the evening of that day, they overtook the Samanas and requested their company and allegiance. They were accepted, because cults often accept anybody who wants to join. Now, I don't actually know if they're a cult. That might have been culturally insensitive. Strike it from the record. Okay. Siddhartha gave his clothes to a poor Brahmin on the road and only retained his loincloth and earth-colored unstitched cloak. He only ate once a day and never cooked food. He fasted 14 days. He fasted 28 days. The flesh disappeared from his legs and cheeks. Strange dreams were reflected in his enlarged eyes. The nails grew long on his thin fingers, and a dry, bristly beard appeared on his chin. His glance became icy. Kind of like Elsa. No, different. When he encountered women, his lips curled with contempt when he passed through a town of well-dressed people. He saw businessmen trading, princes going to the hunt, mourners weeping over their dead, prostitutes offering themselves, doctors attending the sick, priests deciding the day for sowing, lovers making love, mothers soothing their children. All were not worth a passing glance. Everything lied, stank of lies. They were all illusion of sense, happiness, and beauty. All were doomed to decay. The world tasted bitter. Life was pain. Siddhartha is going through what you might call an emo phase. So he's had life handed to him. He's always had an easy life, and now he's trying a different perspective. He's trying a different lens. He came from a lens viewing the world in a very certain way. He was wealthy. He was well cared for. He was well educated. He was well looked after. He's had everything. Okay. And now he's living a life of poverty, and he's refocused from material possessions and that sort of thing to really, really internal spiritual reflection. And so now he's judging everyone who doesn't see the world exactly as he does. That sounds familiar. I don't know about you, but I can think of a few examples of people who judge if other people don't see the world the exact same way that they do, like almost everybody. It could be religion, it could be politics, it could be society, it could be culture, it could be food, it could be sports teams, it could be as serious as racism and as petty as, I don't know, favorite color. But there's a lot of judgment in the world. And Siddhartha is becoming judgmental. So we continue. Also, dang, that is dark. He just said everything is doomed to decay. Yeesh. Let's see. Siddhartha had one single goal: to become empty of thirst, desire, dreams, pleasure, and sorrow, to let the self die. No longer to be self, to experience the peace of an emptied heart, to experience pure thought. That was his goal. When all the self was conquered and dead, when all passions and desires were silent, then the last must awaken, the innermost of being that is no longer self, the greatest secret. And so he's thinking we had the outside world, material possessions, hedonistic pleasures and desires. And if we push all of that away and we push all of it aside, we get rid of our desire for money, for recognition, for love, for food, for water, for procreation. We get rid of everything that could possibly tempt us in any way, be it positive or negative. Once you get completely inside your own head and you have meditated to the point where you're nearly literally dead, that is when you can be closest to your soul. And that may be true, but that doesn't sound like a path I want to take. Now, I'm not knocking fasting, because fasting, even recently, it's always been a religious tradition in many religions. But recently, it's been proven to have, if done right, to have some really profoundly positive impacts on health. But it needs to be intermittent fasting, and it needs to be done correctly. So don't just say, Mr. Fisher said I should stop eating, because that's not good. That's an eating disorder, not a diet. Okay? Diets aren't great either, but I'm getting off topic. Okay? So let's get back to Siddhartha. Silently, Siddhartha stood in the fierce sun's rays, filled with pain and thirst, and stood until he no longer felt pain and thirst. Silently, he stood in the rain, water dripping from his hair on his freezing shoulders, on his freezing hips and legs. And the ascetic stood until his shoulders and legs no longer froze, till they were silent, till they were still. Silently, he crouched among the thorns, blood dripping from his smarting skin. Ulcers formed, and Siddhartha remained stiff, motionless, till no more blood flowed, till there was no more prickling, no more smarting. Sounds like a fun guy to hang out with right now. Siddhartha sat upright and learned to save his breath, to manage with little breathing, to hold his breath. He learned while breathing in to quiet his heartbeat, learned to lessen his heartbeats, until there were few and hardly any more. Instructed by the eldest of the Samanas, Siddhartha practiced self-denial and meditation according to the Samana rules. A heron flew over the bamboo wood, and Siddhartha took the heron into his soul, flew over the forest and mountains, became a heron, ate fishes, suffered heron hunger, used heron language, died a heron's death. A dead jackal lay on the sandy shore, and Siddhartha's soul slipped into its corpse. He became a dead jackal, lay on the shore, swelled, stank, decayed, was dismembered by hyenas, and was picked at by vultures, became a skeleton, became dust, mingled with the atmosphere, and Siddhartha's soul returned, dried, decayed, turned into dust, experienced the troubled course of the life cycle. He waited with a new thirst like a hunter at a chasm where the life cycle ends, where there is an end to the causes, where painless eternity begins. He killed his senses. He killed his memory. He slipped out of his self and into 1,000 different forms. He was an animal, carcass, stone, wood, water, and each time he reawakened. The sun or moon shone, he was again self, swung into the life cycle, felt thirst, conquered thirst, felt new thirst. So Siddhartha's getting a little bit frustrated here. He's trying to escape himself. He's trying to have out of body experiences and kind of empathize with the world around him. Empathy is not exactly the right word, because empathy usually means you care about the pain and suffering of other people, but he's simply trying to understand it and experience it on a spiritual level, which I know is confusing, but he's trying to suffer and die and in many forms as possible without actually dying. He's not trying to kill himself, which you would think that he is, because he's standing out in the freezing cold until he's nearly dead, and he's standing in the sun until he's nearly dead, and he's starving and dying of thirst and dehydration. But he's not actually trying to kill himself. He's trying to get to the brink of death, of destruction, and hoping that there he can spy Atman. He can find that inner piece of the God that is his soul and get close to it. I do not recommend nor endorse this method of spirituality. I think Buddhism is interesting. I think the Samanas are very extreme. Now, that's just my own personal perspective, but I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to plant a flag in that. I don't think you should try to get as close to death as possible to experience God. I think there's probably other ways. I myself, if I wanted some spirituality, I'd probably go out and sit in the woods and just enjoy nature, because nature was created and I was created, and that sounds pretty nice, pretty peaceful. Maybe a nice stream, some leaves. If I got thirsty, I would drink, and if I got hungry, I would eat. Now, that's just my own perspective, and that's okay. It's okay for people to have different practices, because their practices are not affecting me. And I am not trying to force my perspective on them, and they are not trying to force their perspective on me. Therefore, we are peacefully coexisting. Perfect. All right. Siddhartha learned a great deal from the Samanas. He learned many ways of losing the self. He traveled along the path of self-denial through pain, through voluntary suffering and conquering of pain, through hunger, thirst, and fatigue. He traveled the way of self-denial through meditation, through the emptying of the mind of all images. Along these and other paths did he learn to travel. He lost his self in 1,000 times, and for days on end he dwelt in the non-being. But although the paths took him away from self, in the end they always led back to it. Although Siddhartha fled from self 1,000 times, dwelt in nothing, dwelt in an animal and a stone, the return was inevitable. An hour was inevitable when he would again find himself in sunshine or in moonlight, in shadow or in rain, and was again self and Siddhartha, again felt the torment of the onerous life cycle. So he's hoping that he can actually escape from the cycle of life, which sounds like death, but it's not. He wants to dwell beyond life. If life is a circle, like Mufasa told us, it's a circle of life. If you don't get that reference, watch The Lion King. What's wrong with you? But anyway, life is a circle. He wants to exit the circle, and he wants to become aware of the entire circle and all of his past lives and all of his future lives. He wants to become aware of everything, because true knowledge and wisdom combined with exiting that life cycle is bliss, is nirvana, is the oneness, or what have you. At least that's my understanding of it. And so he keeps on fasting and meditating and like leaving his body and having out of body experiences, but he always has to come back to himself. It's inevitable. He's not really beyond the life cycle. He's just getting glimpses of what, it could be like beyond the life cycle. So I know this is kind of heavy, but if we just take it little by little, instead of this big picture stuff about the religion, if we just take little snippets of it and examine it like we're doing with Florilegium, then I think it becomes more relevant to us. And I think the story has a lot of really good lessons that can be learned in it. So bear with me. I know it's still pretty heavy, but it's so good. And it's really beautifully written too. If only I could do it even the slightest bit of honor by being better at reading it. Siddhartha, let's see. I don't know where we're at. I lost my spot. Let's go right here. At his side lived Govinda. His shadow he traveled along the same path, made the same endeavors. They rarely conversed with each other apart from the necessities of their services and practices. Sometimes they went together through the villages in order to beg for food for themselves and their teachers. What do you think, Govinda? Siddhartha asked at the beginning of one of these expeditions. Do you think we are any further? Have we reached our goal? Govinda replied, We have learned, and we are still learning. You will become a great Samana, Siddhartha. You have learned each exercise quickly. The old Samanas have often appraised you. Someday you will be a holy man, Siddhartha. Siddhartha said, It does not appear so to me, my friend. When I have so far learned from the Samanas, I could have learned more quickly and easily in every inn in a prostitute's quarter amongst the carriers and dice players. Govinda said, Siddhartha is joking. How could you learn meditation, the holding of breath, insensibility towards hunger and pain with those wretches? That's kind of judgmental, Govinda. But I mean, he is talking about alcoholics and ne'er-do-wells and prostitutes, so I guess, touche. And Siddhartha said softly, as if speaking to himself, What is meditation? What is abandonment of the body? What is fasting? What is the holding of breath? It is a flight from the self. It is a temporary escape from the torment of self. It is a temporary palliative against the pain and folly of life. The driver of an ox makes this same flight, takes this temporary drug when he drinks a few bowls of rice wine or coconut milk at the inn. He then no longer feels his self, no longer feels the pain of life, and then experiences temporary escape. Falling asleep over his bowl of rice wine, he finds what Siddhartha and Govinda find when they escape from their bodies by long exercise and dwell in the non-self. So Siddhartha's saying, I could have just gotten blackout drunk, and it would be just as successful as what I've done with the Samanas. And Govinda's like, oh, come on, you've learned things. You've learned lots of things. You can hold your breath. You can go days without eating. And Siddhartha says, yes, but has that gotten me to enlightenment? Has that gotten me to nirvana? All those things do. They're just a longer path to getting, going out of my mind, just like someone who drinks too much and passes out. It's the same. So I don't feel like I've advanced in my spiritual journey. Okay. It's an interesting interesting comparison. I'll give him that. Govinda said, You speak thus, my friend, and yet you know that Siddhartha is no driver of oxen. A samana is no drunkard. The drinker does not find escape. He does indeed find a short respite and rest, but he returns from the illusion and finds everything as it was before. He has not grown wiser. He has not gained knowledge. He has not climbed any higher. Siddhartha answered with a smile on his face. I do not know. I have never been a drunkard, but that I, Siddhartha, only find a short respite in my exercises and meditation, and am as remote from wisdom, from salvation, as a child in the womb. That, Govinda, I do know. So Govinda's like judging the drunkards, and Siddhartha's like, I can't really judge them because I've never done that. He doesn't have any wisdom in that regard because he's never experienced it. I think that's foreshadowing, but we'll get into that later. On another occasion, when Siddhartha left the wood with Govinda in order to beg food for their brothers and teachers, Siddhartha began to speak and said, Well, Govinda, are we on the right road? Are we gaining knowledge? Are we approaching salvation? Or are we perhaps going in circles, we who thought to escape from this cycle? Govinda said, We have learned much, Siddhartha. There still remains much to learn. We are not going in circles. We are going upwards. The path is a spiral, and already we have climbed many steps. Siddhartha replied, How old do you think is the oldest Samana and worthy teacher? Govinda said, I think the eldest is about 60 years old. Siddhartha said, He is 60 years old, and he has not attained nirvana. He will be 70 and 80 years old, and you and I shall grow old as he, and do exercises and fast and meditate, but we will not attain nirvana. Neither he nor we, Govinda. I believe that amongst all the Samanas, probably not even one will attain nirvana. We find consolations, we learn tricks with which to deceive ourselves, but the essential thing, the way, we do not find. So no matter how hard we pray and how much we meditate and how much we fast, we're still not becoming truly enlightened. We're just becoming practiced at getting a sample of what enlightenment may feel like. And they, like his father, are still seeking enlightenment. So how can they teach him to attain enlightenment if they themselves have not done it? It seems like Siddhartha needs a teacher who has done it. And then maybe he will trust that he can learn something from that. I'm nodding and mumbling because I lost my spot again. This is just something I do all the time. I lose my spot because I start pontificating. Do not utter such dreadful words, Siddhartha, said Govinda. How could it be that amongst so many learned men, amongst so many Brahmins, and amongst so many austere and worthy Samanas, amongst so many seekers, so many devoted to the inner life, so many holy men, none will find the right path, the right way? Siddhartha, however, said in a voice which contained as much grief as mockery, in a soft, somewhat sad, somewhat jesting voice, Soon, Govinda, your friend will leave the path of the Samanas, along which he has traveled with you so long. I suffer thirst, Govinda, and on this long path my thirst has grown less. I have always thirsted for knowledge. I have always been full of questions. Year after year I have questioned the Brahmins. Year after year I have questioned the holy Vedas. Perhaps, Govinda, it would have been equally good, equally clever, equally holy if I had questioned the rhinoceros or the chimpanzee. I've spent a long time and have not yet finished in order to learn this, Govinda. That one can learn nothing. There is, so I believe, in the essence of everything, something that we cannot call learning. There is, my friend, only knowledge. That is everywhere. That is Atman. That is in me and in you and in every creature. And I'm beginning to believe that this knowledge has no worse enemy than a man of knowledge. I am beginning to believe that this knowledge has no worse enemy than the man of knowledge than learning. So I think what he's saying there is no one is a greater enemy to learning than a teacher, because you can't truly learn without experiencing, and teachers try to teach you without giving you experiences. And so that's not really learning at all. That's just knowledge, and you're not gaining wisdom. Boom. I think there's value in both. I think it helps prepare you to gain wisdom if you have a foundation of learning. And Siddhartha has a foundation of learning. So maybe he's just looking at this from a skewed perspective. He's not taking into account the fact that he knows how to read and how to write and how to think. And he's been so superbly educated that he's able to, look beyond. I lost my train of thought. But he's had a lot of privileges, and I don't think he sees his privilege very well, which is often true in the world. We very often focus on the negative things that we have or the things that we don't have, and we don't focus on all the good things we have, all the privileges that we have. And I realize that privilege can become a hot button topic, politically speaking, but it's true, we do have certain privileges. I mean, we were born in the United States, or at least we live in the United States, or you wouldn't be watching this video. You're not necessarily born in the United States, but you live here. That is a privilege in and of itself. This is a great country. We got a lot of good things going for us. I know it's a pandemic, but it's a pretty good place to be. We're also in Michigan. I like Michigan. Michigan's great. That's a privilege. Forest Hills, pretty sweet. Great education. It's like top 25 in the country. That's a privilege. We also have other privileges. There's a lot of affluence in our community. Even if we are not necessarily affluent ourselves, we still benefit from that affluence, do we not? Very charitable. There are a lot of privileges around us, and we very seldom take time to reflect on the privileges that we actually have. And sometimes we view the world, as Siddhartha may be doing, through the lens of our own privilege, and we kind of skew the world. We forget that people don't other people don't necessarily have the same privileges that we have had or do have. And so we put unrealistic expectations onto them. And that shows less about them and more about us and our naivete, if you will. Now, that was pretty deep. Even I'm not sure if I know what I just said. I'm going to have to think about that. That's why I love this book. It makes me just get pretty deep and pretty philosophical. I like it. Okay, we're almost done with this chapter, I believe. Can't be that much longer. It's a little longer. Good thing I started this video so early. Oh, wait. It's almost 11 o'clock at night. Good thing I'm not manic from lack of sleep. That'd be crazy. Okay, let's continue, shall we? Yeah, I lost my spot again. Okay, here we go. Thereupon, Govinda stood still in the path, raised his hand and said, Siddhartha, do not distress your friend with such talk. Truly your words trouble me. Think what meaning would our holy prayers have, the venerableness of the Brahmins, the holiness of the Samanas, if, as you say, there is no learning. Siddhartha, what would become of everything? What would be holy on this earth? What would be precious and sacred? Govinda muttered a verse to himself, a verse from one of the Upanishads. He whose reflective pure spirit sinks into Atman knows bliss inexpressible through words. Siddhartha was silent. He dwelt long on the words which Govinda had uttered. So those words, he whose reflective pure spirit sinks into Atman. So if you're being reflective, you're looking inside. So this is like meditation and inward thinking here. He whose reflective pure spirit sinks into Atman knows bliss inexpressible through words. So that verse seems to mean anyone who is truly at peace with their innermost self knows bliss beyond other people. But is it the bliss that Siddhartha is seeking, or is it just a bliss? Because there's lots of things that are blissful and happy in life, but that doesn't necessarily mean I am an enlightened, deity, which is essentially what Siddhartha is trying to become. So he's thinking, because his friend just quoted some scripture at him. And when a holy man quotes scripture at a holy man, you know it's about to go down. Yes, he thought, standing with bowed head, what remains from all that seems holy to us? What remains? What is preserved? And he shook his head. Once when both youths had lived with the Samanas about 3 years and shared their practices, they heard from many sources a rumor, a report. Someone had appeared called Gautama, the illustrious, the Buddha. He had conquered in himself the sorrows of the world and had brought to a standstill the cycle of rebirth. He wandered through the country preaching, surrounded by disciples, having no possessions, homeless, without a wife, wearing a yellow cloak of the ascetic, but with lofty brow, a holy man. And Brahmins and princes bowed before him and became his pupils. So they're talking about Buddha. The Buddha, like the one who ascended and became Buddha, which is where this book gets confusing. And this book is about a guy named Siddhartha Gautama, and Gautama the Buddha is who they're talking about. So it's like we're following the path of another man who's on a similar trajectory. Like the Buddha already exists, and this person's just like the Buddha. And somehow this is like a Rick and Morty episode. I don't know how to explain it. It's weird, but I still like it. I think Siddhartha is going to go see himself, like not reflect on himself and think inwardly. He's literally going to go see a manifestation of his possible self. If you haven't seen Rick and Morty, it's a really good show. It's inappropriate, wildly inappropriate, but extraordinarily intelligent. And sometimes there are moments while I'm watching it that I have those moments where I'm like, wow, that was brilliant. This book does that too. That is quite a high acclaim for a lewd show that's an animated series. I'm not saying it's as good as Buddhism or Hermann Hesse, but it's pretty solid. Back to the topic at hand. So they remember that they've heard about the Buddha. And now I'm just going to cut a little bit out here and say they're going to, did I just, wait, okay. They're going to decide to go and see the Buddha. Govinda and Siddhartha are going to leave. But before they leave, they need to get the permission of the chief Samana. Well, that shouldn't be a problem because Siddhartha already got permission from his father to leave his childhood home. So how hard can it be to get this old man to let them go? He's just some 60-year-old ascetic who hates everyone and is very focused on no pleasures and loves no one and only wants spiritual enlightenment. This seems like it's going to be hard. Let's find out what happens. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Page 23, if you're keeping track. Siddhartha informed, on the same day that Siddhartha informed the eldest Samana of his decision to leave him, he told the old man with a politeness and modesty fitting a young man and students. But the old man was angry with both young men, both young men wished to leave him, and he raised his voice and scolded them strongly. Govinda was taken aback, but Siddhartha put his lips to Govinda's ear and whispered, "Now I will show the old man that I have learned something from him." He stood near the Samana, his mind intent. He looked into the old man's eyes and held him with his look, hypnotized him, made him mute, conquered his will, commanded him silently to do as he wished. So while the old man was screaming and angry and raging out, Siddhartha just calmly stared into his eyes. If you were to do that, it would be unsettling. It would make the other person doubt that they were having an impact on you, and the fact that you didn't react to their anger would throw them off completely. If you can remain calm in the face of rage and anger and chaos, you've learned something. That's what Siddhartha does. He just stares into the old man's eyes. Unwavering, he stands and he stares. And it does have an effect on the old man. The old man became silent. His eyes glazed, his will crippled, his arms hung down. He was powerless under Siddhartha's spell. Siddhartha's thoughts conquered those of the Samana. He had to perform what they commanded. And so the old man bowed several times, gave his blessing, and stammered his wishes for a good journey. The young men thanked him for his good wishes and returned the bow and departed. On the way, Govinda said, "Siddhartha, you have learned more from the Samanas than I was aware. It is difficult, very difficult, to hypnotize an old Samana. In truth, if you had stayed there, you would have soon learned how to walk on water." "I have no desire to walk on water," said Siddhartha. "Let the old Samanas satisfy themselves with such arts." I've always wondered about that line. Is that a dig at Christianity? I don't think so. But it could be taken that way, but I'm pretty sure that wasn't his intent. I think and I don't think that the hypnotism was real either. I think both of those things are figurative. I think he's saying that you can learn to do a lot of cool tricks and a lot of things that seem like magic if you are just focused and determined and you have a strength of will. Like, did he really hypnotize the old man, or did he just stare at him until he got so uncomfortable that he was like, maybe I do want these kids to get out of here because they're making me feel a little bit weird. I don't know. But that's the end of that chapter. Chapter 2 is done. 33 minutes. Dang, sorry. I talked a lot. Your job for this chapter is the same as it was for chapter 1. You need to find one quote that stood out to you. One quote. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be anywhere in between. And then I'm going to, on Google Classroom, post something just like I posted for the first one, where you have to write the quote, and you have to give the context to the quote, what's actually going on within the story when the quote is given. And then you have to write a connection, some kind of a specific connection to your life or the larger world. And when I say specific, I mean specific. I want some details. I don't want you to just say like, oh, that's just like how the government treats people. That's not deep. This book is deep, okay? This is time for deep conversations, deep thinking, deep reflection, okay? So get specific. Give me specific instances. If you were going to talk about the government, say, right there, then you need to say, This is just like when the government does this, because this and this and this and this, and they all line up. It's perfect. Okay? Don't just say, because. Give me depth. Okay? That's all I got for you. I talked enough. It's late at night. It's Tuesday night, 11 o'clock. I'm tired. So I'm going to take my headband off. I'm going to get out of here. I think I'm going to go to bed. Like I can't be awake this late. It's crazy. Oh, all right. Well, you guys have a great night. I miss you. I really hope that this whole COVID thing is done before next fall, because I'm really hoping that I can teach some junior and senior classes next year. It'd be great to see some of you guys back as seniors. On a more close, more relevant timeline, Friday is May 1st. And if you have any work that was due before March 12th, before we went on this whole COVID hiatus, if there's anything missing that you didn't do, it's got to be done by Friday. Friday's the last minute, honestly. If you have any missings from that part of the semester that's going to be counted as the 80% of the semester grade, I need it before Friday. And you could try to email me on Monday and be like, Fish, I couldn't get it done by Friday, and here's why. And that's not going to matter at all. And it's not because I'm being heartless, but it's because that's how the district is going to run this. They're closing that section of Power School off Friday. That's the end of that portion. You gotta have it done. So if you have any missing work, or think you might have any missing work, or you're not sure if you have missing work, go to Power School and see if anything says missing. You could also go to Google Classroom and see if anything says missing. Some things in there may not necessarily be graded in Power School. That's just how it is. But if you're missing, like, say, the Red Scarf Girl Reflection Guide, which some of you are, that was a lot of points. There are some other things like that you might want to check on. And there are some of you, and you know who you are because I've talked to you already. We've exchanged emails. You got to get that stuff done. This is it. Don't let fear and anxiety and stress hold you back. This is one of those times where you need to push that stuff down, and you just need to improvise, adapt, and overcome, because you can do this. There's not a single person in any of my classes that can't handle a few late assignments. Okay? If you're confused about how to do them or what to do, email me, hit me up. Maybe I can modify them. Maybe I can explain them better, but you got to get them done. Because if you try to turn anything from before March 13th in after Friday, there's no point. Literally, there's no points. I can't give you any points for it. It's too late. Now, for the rest of this time, for the next 8 weeks or so, I'm going to give you points for everything you do. Like, every assignment is worth like 20 points. And that's great, but that's only worth 20% of your semester grade. So if you have an E for 80% and an A for 20%, I'm not good at math. You know this, I know this, but that's still not good. All right, let that sink in. If you have any missing work, turn it in. And let me know that you turned it in. You got to email me and tell me that you turned in missing work, or else I won't know. Okay, that's on you. This is your responsibility. All right, I trust you guys. I have faith in you. I know you can do this. Check. Don't email me and ask me what you're missing. Look, it's in Power School. It's in Google Classroom. You can do this. Take some ownership. You got this, okay? All right, fist bump. Have a great night.